About 750 million people on Earth right now have tinnitus, that persistent ringing, buzzing, or hissing that seems to come from nowhere. And a surprising number of them have been told it means something cosmic is happening. A spirit is near. The Pleiades are dialing in. Your vibration is rising. Here's the thing. The actual science of why your ear rings is, I promise you, weirder and more unsettling than any of that. We're going to bust 5 of the most popular myths about ear ringing, and by the end, the real cause, the one almost nobody talks about, is going to genuinely surprise you. Let's get into it. One of these myths is believed by people who would never touch a crystal in their life. It's hiding inside completely mainstream advice. And the real mechanism behind tinnitus involves your brain actively hallucinating sound on purpose. We'll get to exactly why that happens, and what it means for whether it ever goes away. There's a belief that goes back at least to ancient Rome. Pliny the Elder mentioned it. That ringing in your right ear means someone is speaking well of you, or that a benevolent spirit is making contact. Left ear? Bad news. Hindu texts echo the same split. Modern New Age forums have upgraded it. Your right ear is now apparently a receiver for higher dimensional transmissions, possibly from beings who have strong opinions about your spiritual growth and very little to say about scheduling. Here is the concrete problem with all of that. Your right ear's primary auditory pathway crosses over and feeds the left auditory cortex, the hemisphere that handles language and pattern recognition. So when your brain hears unexplained noise, the very machinery built for decoding speech starts searching it for meaning. It finds one. The message is real. The messenger is your own temporal lobe, doing exactly what it was designed to do. There is no anatomical left-right spiritual asymmetry. There is a pattern-hungry brain, a random signal, and about 2,000 years of very confident misattribution. If you're finding this useful, a subscribe costs you nothing and means you'll catch the next one. We do this kind of thing a lot. Now the stress explanation. And look, it's not wrong exactly. The amygdala and auditory cortex are directly wired together, which means anxiety genuinely does turn up the volume on tinnitus. That part is real. The problem is what gets attached to it. Just relax, it'll pass. That phrase is doing an enormous amount of heavy lifting. Roughly 1 in 5 people with persistent tinnitus develops clinically significant distress, insomnia, anxiety, depression, caused by the ringing, not the other way around. Waiting it out without any assessment also means potentially missing something treatable. Impacted earwax, Meniere's disease, or, in rarer cases, an acoustic neuroma pressing on the auditory nerve. So yes, stress is a real amplifier. But "it's just stress" is the medical equivalent of telling someone their smoke alarm is annoying and walking away. The alarm might be faulty, or the kitchen might actually be on fire. Right ear, left ear, or both. Which one rings for you? Drop it below. But notice what both of those myths have in common. The spirit theory, the stress theory. They're both your brain narrating a sound it invented. That's the real through line here. And the next one is believed by people being completely reasonable, which somehow makes it worse. Because roughly half of tinnitus sufferers have clinically normal hearing tests. Completely normal. Wrap your head around that one. The previous myth had both feet in the ear. This one lives in the brain. And that distinction matters more than most doctors explain on a first visit. Here is the assumption baked into mainstream thinking. Ringing equals damage. Damage equals hair cells. Hair cells don't grow back. Therefore, you are simply stuck. It's logical. It's also wrong for a significant chunk of people. Roughly half of tinnitus sufferers pass a standard audiogram. Normal. Clean. Their cochlear hair cells test fine, and yet the sound is absolutely there, What's actually happening is that the auditory cortex has turned up its own internal gain, essentially cranking the amplifier to compensate for even minor signal reduction it anticipated might arrive. The result is neural noise, your brain generating sound in the absence of input, the way a microphone squeals when you pull it too close to a speaker. The ear is innocent. The processing chain is running hot. This matters enormously for treatment. If the problem is upstream, in neural gain, in cortical mapping, then protecting your cochlea while still smart isn't the whole answer. Retraining the brain's response is. Sound therapy, cognitive approaches, and hearing aids that reduce that compensatory gain have all shown real promise precisely because they address the right organ. The damage isn't always where you're looking. The most counterintuitive myth is still coming, and it's the one most likely to affect you personally. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Spiritual explanation or science? Which did you believe before this video? Be honest. That upstream neural gain problem is exactly why the nothing you can do verdict is so damaging, because it stops people from looking for the right door. Here's what the science actually shows. Tinnitus retraining therapy, TRT, pairs low-level sound enrichment with directed counseling, and clinical work has documented measurable habituation in a meaningful share of patients. The sound doesn't vanish, but the brain genuinely stops treating it as a threat. Cognitive behavioral therapy doesn't touch the ringing at all, and still significantly reduces distress scores, because suffering and sound are not the same variable. And then there's the subset of cases that simply resolve. Compacted earwax, cerumen impaction is almost embarrassingly fixable. High-dose aspirin has been a documented tinnitus culprit for decades. Quinine does the same thing. Remove the cause, the ringing leaves with it. So where does nothing you can do come from? Often, a 10-minute appointment with a doctor who reached the end of their toolkit and called it the end of the road. That's not a verdict from the science. That's a scheduling problem. Now, noise exposure really is the leading cause. No argument there. But the word always is doing a lot of heavy lifting in this myth, and it quietly stops people from finding the actual answer. There are over 200 documented conditions associated with tinnitus. Jaw misalignment, TMJ dysfunction, is one of the stranger ones. Move your jaw forward or press on the right point along your neck, and the pitch of the ringing shifts in real time. That's called somatic tinnitus, and research broadly suggests it affects somewhere between 65 and 80% of tinnitus patients to some degree. Certain antibiotics, the aminoglycoside class, used for serious bacterial infections, are well-documented triggers. Blood pressure fluctuations, neck muscle tension, even how you're holding your head at a desk, which means a dentist or a physiotherapist sometimes fixes what an ear specialist couldn't. Not because the ENT missed something, but because they were looking at the right system and the wrong body part entirely. The ringing is the symptom. The zip code it lives in is surprisingly large. Guess before the reveal. What do you think is the single most common cause of tinnitus? One-word answer. So here is what's actually happening, and here is the part the body of mainstream advice almost never reaches. The auditory cortex turning up its own gain isn't a metaphor. It's a measurable change in neural firing rates, documented in imaging studies. Neurons in the auditory cortex of tinnitus patients fire spontaneously and in synchrony, even in a completely silent room. The brain isn't broken. It's doing exactly what a well-designed system does when its inputs go quiet. It compensates aggressively. The same mechanism explains why people who lose a limb feel it burning years later. The nervous system does not accept silence gracefully, and here is the concrete answer to whether any of this can actually reverse. In cases where the underlying cause is removable, cerumen impaction, a high-dose aspirin regimen, a jaw misalignment, the ringing frequently disappears when the cause does. For the larger group where neural gain is the driver, the evidence shows something more qualified but still real. Tinnitus retraining therapy produces documented habituation in a significant share of patients over an 18 to 24-month course. Not silence, but a measurable drop in the brain's threat response to the signal, confirmed by distress scale scores. The sound may stay. The suffering doesn't have to. That distinction between the signal and the suffering is the one that changes what you do next. Because you cannot unring a bell that lives in your cortex, but you can teach the part of your brain that decides whether a sound is dangerous to change its verdict. That's not optimism. That's what neuroplasticity actually means in practice. The ringing is real. The sentence, "nothing can be done about it," is not. And the Pleiadian High Council, for what it's worth, has still not responded to requests for comment. So, 750 million people, one nervous system doing its best, and 0 confirmed Pleiadian callbacks. If you have persistent ringing, the one genuinely useful thing from today, ask whether it changes when you move your jaw or press your neck. If it does, that's somatic tinnitus, and that's a different specialist than you'd expect. Drop your ear below, right, left, or both, and tell me which myth you actually believed before this. Subscribe if you want the next one. We're going deep on why your brain mishears words in white noise. It's the same mechanism, and it's even weirder.